come once again to discuss things.
It is I, the one, the only. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Sid2. Joining me today is...
Geek for Fun.
And I'm that Matt Kid.
Indeed. We're continuing our Batman Origins series, and this week we're talking about two ScareCrow stories. One of them is the Batman Annual from 1995. Don't ask me the number, I don't know. And the other one... I'm sorry, what?
Annual 19.
God dang, they've been doing it for 19 years by that point? That's crazy. Batman Annual 19 from 1995, as well as the story just ScareCrow Year 1. So we've kind of been talking about a lot of these stories in the context of, I guess, like, timelining and trying to make it all work. And now we've reached a point where we have two options, and neither of them fucking work, and I'm mad. When I was sitting there, because it's been years since I read the annual issue, I was like, oh man, he mentions Two-Face. Well, you could still probably make it work, but then you see Two-Face at the end, and I'm like, well, this is pretty much just out. There's really no way around that. And then the other one where I'm like, okay, well, let's hope. It's like Robin's already here and shit. I'm like, well, this is just dead on arrival. So, yeah, that's kind of unfortunate. I'm kind of disappointed, not going to lie.
I think it's one of those things, though, where you've got to wink and nudge some things some way with some of these characters that, like, you compare directly to, like, oh, well, this can't happen because of Long Halloween. Depending on what else you fit into, like, if you make, like, a personal canon, which is what we're doing with this, you can kind of fudge some details. It's like, oh, well, maybe it was just Mad Hatter and Long Halloween kind of thing. Like, if you want to make, like, this all perfectly fit in its own way. And then ScareCrow shows up later with Robin or something. But yeah, you're right. It does suck that this one, we've got two options, and yet it kind of breaks our little canon, no matter which one we do.
Yeah.
It's weird to me, considering that, like, Scarecrow's a villain who, publication-wise, shows up pretty early in Batman history. And so while on the Bruce Jones Year 1, I was kind of excited to see Robin, just because, you know, Robin hasn't been in anything we've read so far, which makes sense because they're all Year 1 annuals. It did leave me scratching my head, kind of wondering, you know, Scarecrow shows up so early in Batman's actual publication history. I don't know why we did an origin where he's showing up when Robin's already there, even though it is a pretty young Robin.
I mean, is it though? Is my first thing to that, and then the second thing is, you gotta, of course, remember that, like, Robin's first appearance is Batman #1, right? Like, that's the thing, that he always feels like he comes around later, because that's his story, in the modern day. But it is, like, just worth, one of those cool things worth noting, that Robin's existed, you know, 1 year less than Batman has existed. It's just one of those cool things. But on the more important point, is he young, though? Because, like, he a little flirty bitch, and also... yeah, and also, like, he's flirting with a grown-ass woman who has a job? Like, she doesn't look like a teenager or anything to me. She looks like she's supposed to be, like, in her 20s, the way that the artist draws her. I believe it's Sean Gordon Murphy, too, for that matter. It's just funny shit. So I guess all that being said, which one do you guys want to talk about first?
I guess I kind of want to talk about, because the other one's 2 issues and probably be a little longer, I kind of want to talk about the single issue one first.
Okay, what you got?
The
for
annual.
Selfie?
Well, for this one, I thought it was It was fine. I like some of the moments in it in terms of Batman specifically. But for Scarecrow himself, I definitely did feel, especially because I read these back to back, I definitely did feel like the Scarecrow part of this origin story was a lot weaker in terms of portraying him as a tangible threat, as a like a Batman supervillain. In this, it really did kind of feel like a in the same way where we had that conversation about the Riddler feeling more like C-list in one story, this was the one where it felt like, oh, okay, this is the Scarecrow who's like just a chump. His big villain plan is just like super petty revenge, and that's in both of these, but one of them is done in a better way in terms of just the scale and the fucking brutalness of it by the end. But this one feels a lot more just like, again, the stock that you see a lot in supervillain origins of high school student bully ends up going bad. Again, you almost one for one with the Riddler thing. And you see a lot of stuff with Joker and Penguin that go down similar routes. I don't necessarily think that's as bad for Scarecrow, because I do think him being more pathetic works better for him, because it makes his whole that he needs the gas to be scary. That's an interpretation you can do. So all of that I think is fine. I don't think this was a bad story by any means, but I did walk away from it leaving myself feeling like, well, I really like the Batman part of it and how it talks about fear. And I just wish there was maybe a more competent Scarecrow to like pair up against that. So then you could have had a really good conversation about, okay, what does it actually mean to use fear as a weapon? What does that make you look like? How does you interpret that for other people? How does that affect your personal relationships? Like that really great bit that I think is great for like early Batman of when Batman scares Gordon and Gordon pulls his gun on him. Because I imagine that would happen a lot in the early days.
Yeah. For me, the year one annual was definitely the harder one to get through, because like it just felt like it felt too try hard, I guess, is the biggest problem I had with it. Because like we talked about it a little bit with the Riddler one, where it's like, it feels a little pathetic and we're trying to justify stuff. We talked about it with the Catwoman one, where it's like, oh, we're trying to justify Catwoman's like karate background and stuff. And we do literally the exact same thing with Crane, and it's worse because it's like he learns to fight based on a pun. And it was just like, and like it's not even I mastered a style, Crane style actually, and I'm like, okay, it's really hard to master a fighting style just on your own. You kind of need someone there to master it. Otherwise, you're just really good at hitting dummies. But then the other side of it is, you couldn't have like your name's not Scare Crane. It's your name becomes Scarecrow. Shouldn't your quote unquote fighting style, if you're gonna gather one, come from like crows? Couldn't you have said I developed a style, the crow style or something? Like it's just, I don't know. And I mean, just beyond that, I never need to see Scarecrow fight Batman, like, kicks and punch-ups. Like, that's just not in his character. It's barely in the Joker's character to fight Batman, hand-to-hand. That's not where those characters, these evil genius madmen, really thrive. So why would you feel the need to justify that? It just seems like such a stretch. Ultimately, the only thing I liked in this first story, the only thing that I thought was really, really cool and well done, was the moment that's in both stories. So it makes me wonder if like this is his origin going back to like his first issue appearance kind of thing. Was the notion that he brings a gun into a classroom in order to demonstrate a point. And I like that in particular because there was a time in college where I was giving a presentation on fear, and I considered maybe I should bring in a fake gun and like scare people. No, that's a really fucking dumb idea, Ian. Don't do that. Yeah, so like that moment really worked for me. I'd say, not to compare and contrast them right away, but I do think that particular scene played better in the annual than it did in the year one book. Matt, what do you think of the annual, just in a general sort of way?
I think there's a lot of stuff that gets touched on in the annual that I think you're right, is handled differently, and in some cases better in the two-parter. I will say though, I think there are things about the annual that I really adore. In particular, and I know this is kind of a cop out, but I feel like you guys hit a lot of the story beat, things. But I feel like in particular, I love the art here for Crane. I particularly love the kind of overly exaggerated to the point of being unrealistic depiction of how skinny and gaunt and tall he is.
Mm-hmm.
You look at like him on page 25 where he's, walking away and clapping his heels together, and it gives him this kind of jovial personality, this gaunt, freakish scarecrow who just kind of enjoys his work so much. And I like a lot about that. There's a lot about the scarecrow kind of mythos as a character that comes up here that I really enjoy, such as his fascination with folk stories and, like things like the Wizard of Oz and things like that. Things that just me being an overall fan of this character, I really like a lot of the ideas introduced here. I like the art, I like a lot of it, but ultimately what it comes down to is I feel like it's overall kind of a weak story. And I agree with you. I don't really care for Scarecrow ever getting into fisticuffs with people. Just not a fan of that in general. But there's a lot here I did enjoy just as I'm already kind of a fan of Scarecrow, and I'm just looking at this as someone who's into this character and just kind of going along for the ride here. But I don't think it's one of the stronger year ones as a story, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one of those things where I read this and I'm like, this could be... It's just, there's just a lot of it that could be better, I feel. Like, that's the biggest thing with it. It's just, when you see something and you're just like, this could work, and there's, like, elements in here that do for me, but then kind of the point that Crane himself makes is just how disappointed he was while reading Sleepy Hollow, that it was, like, all just some prank, and then I'm like, yeah, but like, you've recognized the thing that was anticlimactic, and you've attempted to do commentary on it, but ultimately you've just replicated the anticlimax of it. And that's really what I feel, is like, oh, so I got bullied and picked on and tricked. And then I dressed up like a scarecrow and freaked him out, and they died in a car accident. I'm like, I mean, that's maybe a bridge too far, but I could give it to you. But then, I don't know, there's just... I've felt this way with a lot of these, I guess. A lot of them just feel too short. It feels like we're trying to fit too much in, so a lot of these moments don't feel like you get enough time to get the proper payoff, and so things just feel kind of shallow.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, yeah.
I like a lot of the mystery elements in both of these, though. I like how both of these stories, and I'll stay focused on this one, but I like how so much of it is just focused on kind of from Batman's perspective, kind of a whodunit, and they don't actually come face to face until much later in the story, which was something I really enjoyed. It's weird though, because I haven't read these in a while, so I kind of forgot the idea of Scarecrow kind of being a calling card killer who's like leaving straw when he kills people. I had forgotten that was a thing. That kind of threw me for a second, but I did like that aspect of the story a lot, because anytime we get a more detective-focused story, I'm always happy. So I was glad to see that brought into this at the very least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the detective work, you get your iconic Batman in an office looking through a file cabinet moment, right?
Yep, with his with a flashlight in his teeth, and someone comes in and he's just like, go away, which is really good. I really like that a lot. So yeah, we did get that, which was absolutely hilarious. I also like that Crane feels the need to keep his fear gas in like a little skull and shoots it out of the skull. He's really going all in on the gimmick.
Yeah.
So there's a lot here just I enjoyed, but it's It's just unfortunate it's not as tight as it could be, or as real. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, you mentioned the art, Matt, and I gotta say something. Arkham Asylum withstanding, the Scarecrow has never had a good design in comics. Like, the only reason I say Arkham Asylum is because it's adapting the design from the game when they do, like, the Arkham City comics and stuff. I guess you... okay, you know what? I'm gonna rephrase. Arkham Asylum and New Batman Adventures
Yes, I
are
was about
the
to add that.
only two good Scarecrow designs, because, like, I'm just flipping through these pages and I'm like, God, his design sucks. He's never scary. I would never be afraid of this guy. I'd beat the shit out of him.
I think that's again where we're gonna have like sort of like with the Riddler. You ultimately look at Scarecrow, and you have two perceptions. Do you want someone who's just this gaunt dude dressed as a Scarecrow, who's really not scary at all, but then once you're on Fear Toxin, he's terrifying? Or do you want someone like in New Batman Adventures who is actually scary? I've always leaned towards the former. I always preferred a Scarecrow who was pretty unambiguously not that frightening to look at, because he himself was not a very frightening person. Like, he's kind of frightening in how he views people as kind of, he doesn't give a shit about human life. And, you know, he's frightening in that way. But the only time he's actually scary is when you're on Fear Toxin. And I kind of prefer that. And that's why I never really liked the New Batman Adventures design, because I always thought, yeah, this is a scary, cool design. It doesn't feel like Scarecrow to me.
What I would maybe argue with that, personally, is I get what you're saying, but there's kind of a massive elephant in the room with that situation, though, right? Because, okay, so he obviously doesn't get fear then. If he chooses to dress up as something that people won't find scary. I feel like that makes him more of an idiot. It makes him more of not just like a kind of a creepy, like, kind of gotcha moment where, oh, he's not that scary, and then you're lauding and thing. It does feel like, because especially when he talks about it, it's like he puts on the costume and he feels empowered by it. He feels like this is going to make people terrified of him. And people in the comics don't react at him like when he's in that costume he's not scary. They still react to him as if he's the most terrifying thing, even before especially to civilians, even before he's got the fear gas on him. So I feel like that could be a take that you have, and I think I'd rather see you write that, but I don't think that design detail has been taken to be put into the narrative like you're talking about. I think they just write him with that, and he just so happens to be in the same way the Green Goblin kind of had that problem, right? Is they've written the Green Goblin as if his design is the most scary thing in the world, where the original Green Goblin costume looks ridiculous. And it's only when they've changed it and updated that they've kind of made it work. And even when it's kept the same, they've given it that kind of, like, Peter roasted for it, effectively, right? Peter tells him you're not actually scary. Scarecrow never really has that moment to justify it, so I feel like where Ian's coming from with the let's give him an actual creepy, scary design, I think not only just visually it makes the art more interesting to look at, because you can do better stuff with shadows, and it lets the artist play with something a little bit more, but it also narratively lets you get into that deep thing with Scarecrow, which is like he's doing the same thing Batman is he's dressing up in a scary way deliberately to get a reaction from people. The moment you take it away and make it just chemicals, you remove him that one step away from what Bruce does. The moment you make him as close as possible is where you really get some more of the pathos out of it. Because without that, I do find Scarecrow is one of the weaker Batman villains in terms of just, like, trying to delve deeper into him beyond that. So anything that does give him a little bit more meat to him, I'm always in favor for.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm standing. I mean, just, like, to be fair, when I was getting into, like, some of the more obscure, not obscure, the less well-known characters in Batman, like, that's when the Arkham game hit, and we just got that absolutely incredible Scarecrow design. Like, I agree with that. Yeah, like, I like New Batman Adventures design and stuff, but I can kind of agree with Matt that it's maybe like it doesn't really look like Jonathan Crane necessarily. I like the headcanon that fans have come out with that like he's actually dead, but he just came back just to keep doing that. I love that idea. But like just God, the Arkham Asylum design is literally like the best thing, and I think everything that's done Scarecrow since then has done stuff from the Arkham design.
I mean, I think there's something about the needle glove that is inherently perfect because it's this perfect combination of the clinical doctor Jonathan Crane and just a terrifying image because of how afraid people are of needles and stuff like that. I 100% agree with you. I mean, when I think of my perfect Scarecrow, honestly, Arkham Asylum is up there, especially the way that Dino voices that character. So I mean, I'm hearing what you're saying for sure. When it comes to this, I don't know that it's his design I like quite as much as it is the way he's written in motion, because I like how just kind of unnaturally gaunt and thin he is, and I think that is kind of an interesting image because you can't really get away with something that looks quite like this in live action.
No, I gotcha.
And so I do
page
enjoy
28,
that.
I think, is a good example of what you're talking about there, where he's like kind of leaping over the desk at his professor, and he just looks like incredibly distorted.
Right, like that's something that you can't really get away with in live action that I really enjoyed in this.
No, I think that's fair. I don't know. I just read this last night, and I'm already having trouble remembering it, which is I feel like a poor sign to anything's favor. I guess kind of similarly to the Poison Ivy one, this just ends very abruptly, I feel. Like, it's just... I feel like there should be a scene of wind down, and the closest we get is just Crane being locked away in Arkham Asylum next to the Joker and Two-Face. And to be fair, God, I fucking love that ending line. Madness, fear, and laughter. Arkham is shaping up as quite a place. It scares me. I think that is a great ending line for like Batman's internal monologue. Side note, I fucking hate cursive lettering in comic books.
Yes. It's the worst to read. It is the worst.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you guys have anything else you want to talk about with this one, or do we want to just go on to the other?
I mean, for the one thing I do kind of want to talk about, because I think we touched on it a little bit, and I've kind of, I don't know when else we'll get another chance to talk about that, is the idea that we do have, for some reason, people are obsessed with giving the non-physical Batman villains physical traits. It's like we talked about the Catwoman, we talked about it here with Scarecrow, and kind of in Joker as well, is for some reason it really, just on a narrative level, right? None of these guys, no matter what explanation you give them, are going to beat Batman in a fist fight. It would just look weird if I don't think in any of their publication history has the Joker ever beat Batman in a one-on-one fist fight without like a trick or like a cheat or something, right? That's just not going to happen. We as an audience just know that's not going to happen. So all it is when you give these characters these extra, like, oh, well, this person did this, or Two-Face, Harvey Dent was like a street brawler and handled this, is you just boost the page count a little bit by having like a pretty nothing fight scene. At least with Joker, sometimes you can get like some gags in there to make it a little bit more entertaining. But with like people like Scarecrow, is like after the fear gas kind of stops working, he's done, right? Like there's just nothing visually interesting there. So I'm just curious, why do you think there is such that fascination when, like, we have characters like Raish, we have characters like Talia and Bane, who are physical matches, if not physical superiors to Batman? Do we have to keep going back to this well where every Rose Gallery has to be able to fight him?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, you mentioned Joker, and I like the idea that the Joker has, like, the strength of a madman. Like, you've heard that phrase, like, you can bite through your finger as with the same amount of force you use to bite through a carrot, but your brain won't let you do that. I like the idea that the Joker's just able to do that if he wanted to, which could probably be a pretty terrifying ass scene to put in a comic or something. But like, I like to imagine that the Joker's like physically about as strong as a person of his build could be. Like he just, a surprising amount of strength can come just in a fit or a burst because he doesn't care if he injures himself doing it. Like his brain, that part of his brain is just turned off. So he will hit you with enough strength to instantly break bones in his hand. I'm okay with that, but yeah, he doesn't need to be a freaking Joker as a ninja. Is just a terrifying concept of stupidity. As far as why we keep doing this, yeah, because it does just seem silly, and it does just seem like we go out of our way to get there. And I just don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me, because comics with fight scenes are kind of like a thing I don't really get as a whole, because a fight is visceral, it's in motion, and it's not that it can't work, but it's not the thing that draws me to comics all that often. And maybe you and I differ on this, Alfie, but like I'm more interested in comics for like really striking visual art that's like got a lot of mood and pathos behind it, and cool dynamic action can be fun and stuff too, but it doesn't do as much for me, especially when I'm not as invested in the fight. And it's Batman versus ScareCrow, and he's already got a gimmick to defeat the fear gas. I know how this fight is going to end. It's like it just the stakes are just gone at that point.
Yeah, I mean,
and I'm with you there.
It feels like something where it's a superhero comic. They want to pad it out with some kind of like. I agree with you on that, Ian. It's like we need to fill it with action because it's a superhero comic. It's a Batman comic. There's got to be a fight scene. There's got to be. It almost comes across as kind of pandery, or not having enough faith in the strength of your writing, or just stretching page count for the sake of not having to write more dialogue. I mean, it comes across as a little bit of all of those things in certain situations, and unless you can back it up with some really interesting dynamic art, which some comics do. There are some comics where I'm legitimately enthralled by a fight scene because of how it's drawn, the motion and the movement that they're able to imbue in a still image. But when you don't have that, and you just have kind of a weak fight between two characters that, like you said, how it's going to end, it really just comes across as padding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. Because, like, I don't know, this whole fight sequences that he has with Crane, I mean, it's not, like, overly long or whatever, but you got the fear toxin. You have the chance to do, like, really trippy-ass, haunting imagery. And instead we get a fight in a cornfield with a stick.
And Crane Fu!
And Crane Fu, right? Like, Batman's got this plan of, like, this nose filter that's gonna prevent him from breathing in the fear toxin. Okay, what if that doesn't work and he has to, deal with Crane while under the fear toxin? Like, it's weird. Batman confronts the Scarecrow, or thinks he's confronting the Scarecrow twice. Once he gets hit with the fear toxin and Crane isn't there when it works, and the next time he gets hit with the fear toxin and it doesn't work and Crane is there. And that's just an odd choice to me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's kind of all I got on this one. I wasn't super pleased with it, and also Two-Face being there kind of ruined the whole thing. God damn it!
Just saved at the end. You're like, oh well, but this one is the weaker story, but at least this one fits. Fuck it.
Right. All right, let's go ahead and move on and talk about ScareCrow Year One. So, Matt, you were the one saying, like, I have the take on this one, right?
I mean, I've read it. I like this backstory, as kind of ridiculous and stupid as it is. And I like Sean Gordon Murphy's art quite a bit. It kind of makes it feel like a cartoon, which I don't know is super major appropriate for this story, just because ScareCrow's design is kind of funky, and we'll get to it. But ultimately, this was the backstory for Crane that I always kind of enjoyed and really didn't care for when they replaced it with the New 52 origin. And we have so much focus on his father being kind of a proto Scarecrow. So I enjoyed this a lot. I'm not going to come out here and defend its honor like super mega hard, but I quite like this story. I think it's fun.
I've never read this before, so I really don't know. Like, I reacted to it in a way, but I don't really have like strong feelings on it. It's just when you're like, oh, I have some things to say about that book. I thought you were gonna come out here with like the steaming hot take. I had my oven mitts ready and everything.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to give.
Alfie, give me that hotness.
Because I like it.
All right, let me show the newbie the ropes. This is how you do a hot take. All right, just rubber up your ears because I'm about to smash up my thick, lubricated opinion. I don't. This is cool just for one thing, all right? It's a very subjective thing, but because Ian's hyped me up, I have to say something I'm passionate about, and everything about this book I'm just kind of like happy with. What I'm passionate about is they fucking finally gave us the thing you mentioned at the start of this video, which is, yeah, Robin turned up in Batman #1, and all the major villain origins happened after Robin was around in publication history. Finally, we get a fucking villain origin that happens while Robin's the sidekick. I can't think off the top of my head of anyone's like that except for like Bane and the much later villains like Ra's al Ghul and everything. But once you've got a mainstay core Gotham-based Batman villain like ScareCrow, who just so happens to be around where Robin is, it's like it really makes me want to say, okay, can people just do a run where it's like Robin is the first thing that happens and then you get Joker, just to see what it would look like, because that completely changes a lot of the dynamic. And I think that's what I got so much enjoyment out of this story. If it was just a Batman Scarecrow thing, you would have had that kind of very much the same as the first annual, right? It's where Batman's a very silent figure, so you get a lot of inner monologue. And eventually he overcomes his argument by himself in kind of a very quick and short way. And he doesn't really interact with Scarecrow that much, outside just beating him down. If you throw Robin in that mix, though, you immediately get such a great juxtaposition between a character like Batman and Scarecrow, and why Robin is the key for Bruce overcoming the attempt of ruling through fear, right? Is like Batman is meant to do that. But part of why Batman's meant to defeat crime is he's also an inspirational figure. You can't scare everyone in Gotham, because if you scare the people you're going to be saving, they'd be too frightened to act because they'd think you're this overlord bat god. You throw Robin in there and you have that bit of hope, you have that bit of levity, and it really keeps Bruce grounded in this story in a way where he has someone to talk about his fears to and communicate, and that's how you grow past it. So I love that choice, because I think it immediately makes the Scarecrow story much more interesting than just having Batman versus Scarecrow, because again, it's kind of, there's not much conversation there. Joker works so well because he kind of drives it out of Batman. Riddler works so well because, again, he forces Batman to talk. Scarecrow himself is trying to go for the same vibe as Batman, so he really shouldn't be that much of a talker unless it's kind of in a very slasher villain's way. He's quite talkative in this, but again, it's not in that kind of provocative sense like a Joker would be. So you throw Robin in there, and I think it really saves this story, and I enjoyed it a lot for that reason. There's the hot take, there's the ramble. Matt, you let us down. I had to pick up the slack.
I'm sorry. No, I actually, I do agree. I liked seeing Robin here a lot, because he, even just doing something as simple as having that moment where, Robin is seeing two different Batmans, and he's kind of, they have that moment where he's like, are you actually that afraid of me? That's the kind of moment that you wouldn't get in a solo Batman story. So, I mean, I 100% agree with you for sure, because I think bringing Robin here not only added a lot of charm to the story, just because Dick Grayson is a charming son of a bitch, but also it did add that element to it that you wouldn't have gotten without him.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, I like the Robin inclusion for all the reasons you guys are talking about, but I do think there's something. Okay, let me kind of skip ahead a couple months or weeks, I guess, into I guess why I prefer Batman to have, pretty much his entire rogues gallery, or the majority of it at least, established before anyone else gets involved besides just Batman and Alfred. I like the idea of that theme of escalation. We start out with year one, and he's got this plan of how he's going to defeat crime, and the only thing that Batman doesn't think of is that, what if they change? What if my methods force them to change in ways I can't predict? Which is exactly what happens, and that's where you get like Joker stepping in, and that's where all the other crazy crime starts to happen. I like the idea that he's not really prepared for that, and it's getting kind of darker and scarier the more that it happens, the more that these criminals kind of surface. I really like that idea of that escalation happening, and then the way that he ends up dealing with it, not necessarily intentionally, is by bringing in others, realizing that he requires help in this in a way that he just has not been able to admit to himself before. I just think that's a really cool way to look at Batman, and so I like things that kind of feed into that narrative a little bit. So while both of these stories end up breaking the continuity, and while I think you're right, guys, the Robin inclusion is probably a lot better. It makes the story a lot better than it otherwise would be. I kind of prefer the other one a little bit more, because it at least establishes that idea of a Scarecrow or a Batman who's got like this darker and darker rogues gallery building before he gets that kind of light of hope in the boy that he could be, kind of thing.
What I would maybe argue, just in how, because I'm with you, I love the escalation thing, but I don't necessarily think Robin has to be the full stop on that. Specifically Dick Grayson, because all those reasons you're listing of like Batman realizes what his mistake is and that he's not been bringing people in, is I don't think he's conscious of that when he picks up Dick. Mm-hmm. I think that is a very emotional, raw reason of just, I need to help this kid who's me. I see myself, and it's very emotionally charged because I'm still very new at this. I'm like year 3, year 2. And I'm just going to bring in this kid, and I'll give him the tools that he did because we're so similar, and I know this helped me deal. And if I got this at an earlier age, maybe I wouldn't be so fucked up right now. So it's not necessarily focused on Robin as the mission. It's focused on Robin just helping this individual person. He doesn't realize what he's doing yet. It's the first time in the plan that he's not doing something focused on the plan.
Oh, so no, I absolutely agree. I'm talking about, like, that's the effect it has outside of his thought process.
Yes. But just in going from that, then you introduce villains like ScareCrow, and if you want to throw in a couple of later ones, like maybe this is where Hugo Strange comes in, probably throw him in earlier or something, but, just like random Batman villains, like Mr. Freeze or something can come in now, and like more kind of out there villains who are using like chemicals and like mind-altering stuff, whereas like Joker just makes a Richter grin. Scarecrow's literally making you get trippy visuals, Mr. Freeze is doing all this. So you're moving a little bit lighter, but then the real full stop of the escalation of just, okay, this is Batman's true ray of hope that he's got it now. He's got how to beat crime, is Batgirl. Is because that's when a random civilian, just following his example, does the thing and starts making a difference. And then obviously you get into Joker's response to that and you just go all the way to the timeline. But I feel like Batgirl works more in terms of just a narrative arc of that's when Bruce gets it, because he's not the one who made Barbara's choice for her. He didn't make Dick's choice for him, but it's definitely he gave him the resources. Barbara just kind of went at it herself and then got brought into the fold. So it's how I look at it. I don't know how you feel about that, if that maybe helps thing as well, if you consider the entire Bat family. But that's always how I've kind of rationalized it in my head canon, is Robin is like near like the last third of the escalation, but the one who really caps it off and goes more into the like everything's fully formed now that's when Batgirl enters the scene.
I like that. That's a good idea. Cool. Cool. Good talk. Good talk. Uh,
Well, that ScareCrow guy.
yeah, that ScareCrow guy. I will say, like, there are things I like about this two-parter, the year one story, more. But then there are other things that just feel like incredibly awkward mid-2000s comic book. So like, I'll try to do like one, then the other, then one, then the other. So like, I really like the beginning of the first issue where they think they're chasing ScareCrow and then they literally end up like kicking dummies. I think that's a really fun, cool, kind of crazy idea that ScareCrow would come up with. I think I just enjoyed that. Then the thing I didn't like, god damn, that is some of the most like straight up racist white person trying to write a black person character.
Oh my god, yes. That was painful to read.
I am so glad it's just one scene. You have no idea. It was just like, it bad. It really bad. Thing I liked, Batman method of interrogating is so much better when Robin is there. Like Batman, you know, we had it in the last week with the that one, yeah. The Poison Ivy one, I think it was, where he's like hanging the guy from the flagpole. Or maybe that was Man-Bat, I can't remember, whatever. It was like hanging the guy from the flagpole and he's like kind of a jerk, but at the same time, he's a criminal and you're not supposed to think about it that hard. Batman just fucking tearing through places while Robin's like, okay, yeah, you broke this guy's bar. Here, let me pay for it. It's just, that adds so much. I really like how Robin changes the dynamic of Batman's interrogation methods. Oh, that shit's fun.
Really helps it from becoming torture, right? He's just that one bit there to make sure that you know that it is being considered, but when Bruce is just in that mode, he can't himself show that hint of weakness because it kind of breaks the illusion of the monster. If he's got Dick there to kind of do the things that he don't do, like even if Bruce isn't consciously considering that, I think subconsciously that's part of the reason why Dick's probably got money in his utility belt.
Yeah, absolutely. What was the other one that was just like really, really painful? It's not coming to mind at the moment. Maybe it's in issue 2 somewhere. I'll go for the more nitpicky. Oh, no. The other one that was really, really painful. God, it's just wife-beating asshole character completely there to just be wife-beating asshole character and not really add anything to the plot. And also make things slightly more confusing, maybe? Oh, yeah, it is in the second issue that you start seeing that. Okay. Yeah, I don't know what purpose he serves, besides just to set up a really funny Batman line.
Yeah.
You're not, I mean,
You're not wrong.
Sometimes that is all that's necessary for a character's role, because Batman funny lines, you know, they can be pretty killer. We talked about it on Twitter as well, so there is some of those things. But yeah, I can see your point.
Like, there's this whole subplot about, like, the deed to the Crane family land, and I'm like, it's only him that's interested in it for reasons? I don't...
That didn't serve you could probably just take out the whole deed subplot and you wouldn't even miss it.
It's so weird, especially because, like, it ends, you have the very, like, I think it is, yeah, it's the very last panel of the whole story, and you see the deed is in Crane's grandmother's hand, buried with her, and I'm like, what was the point of this? Like, there's just nothing that... He's the drunk husband's the only character that cares about the deed. It feels like one of those moments where that could be a really great ending if the deed was like actively important in the story, and it's just it feels like maybe they had the idea for this ending, or maybe there at one time was a version of the script where the plot like really centered around the deed to the house. but then ultimately that part got cut or something. So where the year one annual felt too short, this one's had two, full size or two giant sized issues to tell its story, and it still falls short of telling as full a story as I feel it wants to tell.
Yeah, there's definitely a mismanagement of resources here.
And then positive thing besides, I guess, just the air conditioner. I really do like Crane's plan isn't entirely based around just the fear toxin. I like that there's like this wider thing about like training birds to kill people. I think that's a really cool dynamic that the ScareCrow should keep. I think that's just a cool fucking idea that he can attack you multiple ways. And birds, it's got like they straight up mention Hitchcock at one point, and like that's just a good thing. You need to associate ScareCrow with horror iconography more, because they did that with they did that in like No Man's Land, where he just like speaks in rhyme and it kind of comes off like Poe, and I love that. That's that good.
Yeah, I agree with that.
What do you this is more aimed at Matt, because he specifically goes for the Virgin versus the Chad villain. How do you feel about Scarecrow kind of getting the one-up on Batman a lot of times in this, and kind of being more of, at least compared to thing like he's meant to be portrayed a little bit more physically scary? Like, did it work for you in this story, or are you still kind of sticking true that you prefer the other version of like that physicality?
My thing has always been that Crane's backstory is that he was a gaunt, skinny kid who became a university professor. Now, I don't know how many university professors I know of who I think could remotely get one up over someone like Batman in a physical competition. But at the same time, I like the idea that Jonathan Crane is, able to one-up him based solely on, using the fear toxin or doing things that he's able to think of that Batman might not have anticipated. So I will never enjoy Crane getting one up over him just because he was able to overpower him in any way. But I certainly don't mind him outthinking Batman. That doesn't bother me at all, especially when Crane is generally considered to be one of the best minds in all of Gotham and all of Batman's rogues gallery. Crane is handled very kind of interestingly here, especially his look. I don't know if it's just the art style or what, but he doesn't even look as gaunt and skinny as he traditionally does. So that does kind of help sell it a little bit, and that he looks a little bit younger, he looks a little bit stronger. So at least for this, it works fine. I'll still think I'll always prefer the ScareCrow design from the annual over something closer to this, though.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Again, Jean-Claude Murphy is a good artist, and he really tries his best to make Scarecrow look intimidating. But something I feel is telling here is that Scarecrow spends the majority of this comic with his mask off. The majority of the time you're seeing Scarecrow in this story, he's got the mask and the hat off, and he's just Jonathan Crane kind of kicking around in the Scarecrow's, outfit otherwise. I just don't think this design is scary. Like, everything like the witch's hat and all that, it never works.
This looks like if you were going to do a version of the Scarecrow in an alternate universe who was like a good guy. That's what this looks like. This looks like Scarecrow if he was a character in the Soul Eater anime. This looks like
Weeb Crow.
I like the straitjacket of the design, and I like the big hat, but the weird witch's cape with like the pumpkin clasp or whatever. This design doesn't work for me. It's visually kind of interesting. Like it's a little too try hard. It's a design that I think just visually is kind of a neat look. Like I think Sean Gordon Murphy did design something that like looks aesthetically pleasing as a costume. I just don't think it really fits with the Scarecrow, and I actually really don't like how much he spends his time out of the mask, because I almost view Scarecrow as someone who has not like a Rorschach level, but someone who almost sees the mask as kind of his real face. And so I don't like how much he's out of it, especially considering that his face is just the most like middle-aged dad-looking face in the world.
There's that great scene in the Joker blogs where it's obviously because they couldn't get someone who looked like Cillian Murphy, but when Joker sits next to Crane in Arkham, Crane's still got the mask on, and he doesn't take it off to eat because he loves it so much, and he refuses to remove it. I think that's a great character. I feel like that's a great, for Scarecrow specifically among the other villains. I like that he's kind of got that as his, when Two-Face loses his coin, he kind of breaks down. I like that Scarecrow is like, can be, because if you take it for like Batman, right, and you push it to the extreme of, okay, so these villains are extreme versions of what Bruce Wayne could have been. Batman sometimes is portrayed in some medias of just kind of Batman's the real face and Bruce Wayne's not, and that's also kind of, when you push it beyond just like this is what he needs to do his mission and to save lives, you push it to the extreme, it does become he's still scared 8-year-old Bruce Wayne, and he put on a scary mask to hide that, and he's protective of it, and he breaks down without it. You turn that into Scarecrow, who will be this intimidating, terrifying figure when he's got the full ensemble on, like in Arkham. But you remove it, and you just see him for the real person. He just starts breaking down, snot over his face, like, give me my face, give me my face. I actually think you should pull it all the way to the Rorschach level, where that is his true form of, like, psychosis, is when he's in the mask, you won't even know he's really insane, because he's very calm, and he's very, like, almost Hannibal Lecter-esque. He's not doing crazy laughs like the Riddler or the Joker. He's very monotone. The moment he takes off, everything just changes. I think would be a great angle for Scarecrow.
Do you remember there's a scene in an animated series? It's like one of, if not like the first Scarecrow, or no, it's a Harley. I forget what episode it is. But Batman and Robin are dragging Scarecrow.
Yes.
He's like, I'm the master of terror. You will never. And then Harley's like, I am Mr. Crane, and he's like, good evening, child. I'm the master of terror. Like, that's, oh god, I love it. And that kind of right there encapsulates a lot of what I like about the character, and about how, and because that's why, like in Arkham, he's got these interview tapes where he's just so calm, and he's just like, Dino really understood what he was going for with that character, and then as soon as he puts the mask on, he's like jumping around, and he's super excitable, and he's like, super happy to be there. And that's the dynamic I really want to see more with Scarecrow, is that he's really calm one minute and then just so excited to be there the next minute as soon as we get the mask on. And as soon as you have a story like this where he acts exactly the same in the mask as when he's not in the mask, and then spends like 90% of the issue not in the mask, that frustrates me a lot, because I love the backstory. I like this is what happened to him as a child, but the moment-to-moment writing frustrates me because it's not as exaggerated as I like to see this character.
Yeah. How did you feel about the notion of Batman using Scarecrow's fear toxin against him in the story? Because that's one where I've always had a bit of trouble with it. Because, I mean, like, it seems like one of those things that gets done with Scarecrow a lot, where he ends up dosing himself in one way or another.
I don't mind it as like a, because we got that even in Batman Begins, like a taste of your own medicine. There comes a point in Batman canon, at least pre, New 52, pre-Rebirth, kind of closer to Nightfall time, but there eventually comes a point where Scarecrow becomes immune to his own toxin, and like he just is, like, the part of your brain that feels fear just stops kind of working. And so I don't mind if Scarecrow starts from a place of he gets his fear toxin used against him, and that maybe happens once. And then he works so hard to make sure that he's immune to it that it can't happen again. So I don't mind it in like a first appearance type story. I mean, unless you're talking about whether or not it's ethical for Batman to actually use it, which I don't really have a huge problem with that either.
I mean, I like to imagine like he's, you know, Batman always drops like the smoke pellets and stuff. I like to imagine he's kind of created a milder version, because there's like that notion that that Batman like drugs himself. I think this is a Morrison bit in the early parts of his run that Batman like drugs himself with like small doses of Joker toxin and small doses of Crane's fear toxin, so he'll be physically immune to them if they get used on him in full doses in combat. So he obviously has the fear toxin formula. This might be like too far for some. I'd be perfectly okay if Batman just, you know, makes like a really mild version of the fear toxin and releases it whenever he does like the smoke bomb getaway thing.
I mean, that's what happens in Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah, he does it because he's all old and he's just like, I can't rely on the speed like I used to, so I got to use this to kind of compensate for the fact that I'm as fuck now. And I always liked that idea.
Yeah, I did not remember that. That's funny that it kind of stuck in that way.
He's got a point where like some cop is like freaking out, and Batman's like, you're experiencing your personal favorite nightmare or something like that, because he's just you know, even in like Tower of Babel where he uses Crane's fear toxin. So I think it's interesting how many different writers have picked up the fact that fear toxin kind of makes perfect sense for Batman to use.
I mean, we use it twice in our series too.
Especially because fear toxin, it doesn't always end in the victim dying. It's kind of weird to me that like everyone here like dies of a heart attack because they die of fright, and that's okay. But I always preferred the version of fear toxin where it really only kills you if you have an immediate way to commit suicide nearby, and that's something you might do. I always kind of liked that idea because we see that a lot in other forms of media, and so it's kind of weird that, I mean, unless he's able to make a more potent version of it, just everyone dies of a heart attack.
Because he really should want it to. Because how I imagine ScareCrow is, if he's fully unimpeded and he has no worry that Batman's going to chase him down, he's going to kidnap someone, random person off the street, throw him in a cellar, inject them, sit and watch.
Yep.
And that's just going to be how they end. Not from death or anything. He's just going to watch until they fucking die from like starvation or something, and just see what it does to the human brain, write down the notes, and then do the next one. And maybe at some point he's going to jack off to it, like.
Alfie's always gotta take it that next step further, doesn't he?
Look, with ScareCrow I don't have to. Come on, like, of all the Batman villains who's gonna jack off to their own work, it's fucking ScareCrow. He's the definition of fucking incel.
So here's another thing that I kind of want to come back to just for the sake of coming back to it. Like, in neither of these stories, ScareCrow himself is not particularly physically scary. I really want to see the design for ScareCrow where he can be physically scary but still look like a scarecrow, because that was my biggest problem with season 4. That's my biggest problem with this ScareCrow in the Sean Gordon Murphy art style, is that it seems like we're either going to make him try to be scary or we're going to make him look like a scarecrow, and we're bad at doing both of them at the same time. And so that's something where I still want him to kind of look like he does in the annual, but I wish we could do that, but make it kind of scary, so that way we can meet both of those worlds. And I just feel like that hasn't been done super well.
I mean, if you ever watched, well, I think perfect for that, exactly. If you ever watched the episodes of Doctor Who where David Tennant kind of like has to make himself human, there's a scarecrow monster in that. I forget what they're called, but they look really great, and they're exactly what you're talking about. Is they're just scarecrows brought to life that have like a creepy bag face, and they're scary in a way, but they're still very identically just scarecrows that have come to life. You just throw someone in that suit and maybe edit a little bit to make it a little less, because Doctor Who's a kids show. You make it a little less, more intense in the face or something, give them like the Arkham hood or something. I think there you go. There's your perfect live action scarecrow. Like, I think the straw is something that's missing.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what you do. The straw's cool. I like the noose. I really like the noose.
Yeah.
I don't know why you'd put a noose on a scarecrow, but there you go.
Crows hate it. They're like, oh shit, he's gonna hang us.
Crow's like, man, that's some bad fucking juju. Oh my. Yeah, I don't know. That's it's a harder one, I guess. Again, I don't know. Arkham design, best design. I've yet to see anything that tops it. That's all I got. That's all I have to contribute to this conversation. I apologize.
I love incorporating the gas mask into his mask.
Mm-hmm. That practical part just kind of works. Practical is always a fun place to at least start for Batman character designs. Excuse me.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. I wish I had more of substance to say about either of these. Because Scarecrow's just a character I'm really close to, so I just I like what I like, and everything else I just disregard in my own headcanon.
What's your favorite Scarecrow story?
There's a story in Nightfall, Fear and Faith, that I fucking love. And it's this point in Scarecrow's life where he doesn't have his fear toxin anymore. And he has no fear toxin in that entire story. He's at a church during Nightfall.
That's I think it's No Man's Land, not Nightfall. You're thinking of.
I'm sorry, I'm getting my events confused. I'm sorry, whoopsie. Yeah, he's at, I'm losing all my credibility real fast.
It's just you started talking about him like, yeah, this is my favorite Scarecrow story too.
No, I'm so sorry. No, he's at a church during No Man's Land, and Huntress shows up and is just like, oh fucking, it's the Scarecrow. I'm gonna murder the shit out of him because that's how Huntress be sometimes. And the congregation is like, well, wait a minute, he hasn't done anything. And Scarecrow's just like, wait a minute, I haven't done anything. And it's about how he just uses his knowledge of psychology to just slowly manipulate these people into essentially causing their own destruction, and how excited that makes him. It has nothing to do with his fear toxin. It has nothing to do with making him look scary. It's just him talking to groups of people and playing on their little insecurities and their little fears and their worries to the point where he just escalates this conflict, and it's so good. It's probably my favorite Scarecrow story.
Yeah, that is a good one. I agree. I wish we got more of that.
Me too.
You know, that's a good point. Just more things that kind of delve into the psychology background, because I mean, he knows exactly what to say to manipulate the shit out of people, right? They should probably do that more.
I think that's how you make the non-physically scary Scarecrow work. I think you make him someone who's like this silver-tongued devil or whatever. Someone who can just really get in your head in a way that most people can't, because he just knows how the human mind works, and he knows how to play on those things. I think that's how you kind of approach a version of Scarecrow who's really not all that frightening physically, but he's so masterfully in control of any conversation he's a part of that he knows how to make you doubt yourself, how to make you feel fear of something. And I really liked that in that book, and that's something we don't get a ton of in either of these, because it's more just, here's Scarecrow, here's his gimmick, here's his emotional, angsty backstory.
Which, I mean, can we talk about that for a second? Of just how fucking weird his backstory in this is.
I love it.
It's like, what time period are we in? This is like a freaking Jane Austen novel plot.
Yeah, it's really convoluted, isn't it?
Like, he just has to be the child of the daughter who went off the rails of drugs, and then immediately is like, oh, we'll fucking bury the baby with the others. And I'm like, whoa, okay. And then it's just like, oh no, they didn't bury me, actually, they adopted me, but they taught me pain and punishment. And like, the whole time, I'm just like, really? We need to... It's the trap I see so many Batman writers run into when they do the villain origin. Is like, you can start Scarecrow at... He was a professor who just kind of lost it into his research. That's it. That's all you need. That's the character. you don't. Maybe he's scorned by his peers or something, give him that kind of pathos. But after that, just run to the races, just saying, no, he's just a fucked up dude. But all this shit, and like, I again as well, both these stories have this of like, it has to be inspired by Ichabod Crane and all of that. And I get that it is a fun part of the character to add. But I think that's like flavor text, right? That's sprinkles. That's like, oh, this is a cool extra thing he has that the other supervillains don't. It's not the core of why he should be doing this. A lot of this, I feel like, doesn't really... None of these stories, in my mind, capture what I would want to see in just how he makes a deduction, how he falls in love with fear, and how he plays with it before he decides to... Because I always imagine ScareCrow becomes ScareCrow out of necessity. Because in his dream world, he'd very much want to just still be doing this to like patients or students or wherever you have him before he turns. It's only after he gets caught initially that he has to do the supervillain thing to kind of make it work, and then he gets into that kind of because like the fetish idea.
Oh man, you gave me just such a good idea for the ScareCrow origin, like because he gets kicked out, drummed out of university for like bringing a gun into a classroom in both of these stories, but like. You know what, like, every psychology student is required to do for their degree? Is take part in psychological experiments. Like, it's just, the entire industry is based around it, which is probably why psychology is maybe bullshit. But we'll not get into that. Like, that's a big problem when that's a good chunk of your sample size, right? But anyway... Psychology isn't science. Anyway, so like there's that premise though of like every psychology student has to take part in psychological experiments. What if like the first like experiment that Crane runs as a professor, he's like, all right, I'm really interested in fear, and like he's just really passionate about it. And then he gets like that first little rise out of seeing just how scared someone got in this experiment. And then just like 3 or 4 years in a row, he just keeps amping it up to get that fucking rush again, to the point where the experiments become completely unethical. What's the name of that test? Does anyone remember this, of like the Mechandol test or something like that, where it's someone's in one room and they've got like a control panel, and they think there's another person in another room who's hooked up to an electric shock machine, and they're asking them questions, and when they get an answer wrong, they like press a button that gives them a shock, and they don't know that the shock isn't real, that the person on the other end isn't actually getting shocked, but they think that the shocks are getting worse and worse and worse as they get more and more questions wrong. And like to the point where like people are like begging them, please stop, I don't know any of the answers, please don't shock me. It's like, well, I've got to continue for the experiment. Like, then it just gets to the point where like the person stops responding, and then they keep going up on the shock thing. Like, just imagine Crane doing that, but like making it even worse. That's what he gets fucking drummed out of college for. That would be the shit for a ScareCrow origin.
And like you've just come up for that for like a Geeky Chatterman podcast recording that's not even been that long, right? And it's like you've already got to like, this is what people are here for the character. This is what makes them tick. And I hate to keep ragging on these people because I do respect a lot of the ideas at play here. But I do keep feeling like a lot of these writers have other stories that they've wanted to tell, that they're just using these characters that are vaguely connected to kind of get them across, of like, I got this really cool story about the grandmother and the son who's inherited the place and all of that. The same with the Catwoman thing is like, I got this really cool story about the ninja dogs furries. But all of that kind of like is like, okay, you're not tapping into what the year one thing is meant to be, or the origin of the character is meant to be, which is like, okay, what makes this character tick? Why is this character lasted for so many years? And how can we flesh out an aspect of their early life by focusing on the gimmick? So Riddler, thankfully, a lot of his things were talking about how he worked out how he's going to do the riddles. ScareCrow is what you should have. It's like we just said, Ian. It's like we should have been getting the entire story should have just like almost like a Halloween thing where it fucking ends with him putting on the mask, and like it doesn't even, you don't even have to read it like a Batman story. It's just a really fucked up horror comic. until you get to the end of it, and now it's a supervillain thing. Like, all of that is just right there on the page. We're not the fucking smartest people in the world. It's not hard to get it.
Speak for yourself.
I mean, true. You two are just fucking showing me up right now, so I'm just gonna hype you both up. But like, I genuinely believe, I just want to ask these people, like, was this a conversation? What did editorial say you had to back off from the horror elements, make it more action adventure, or was it just something that they weren't interested in doing? And then, if so, I ask, well, why even do a ScareCrow origin?
I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, you have a story of ScareCrow as a professor, Crane as a professor, getting the high off of that fear. And it even plays off of what's already here, because in both of these stories, we have a kid who was picked on a lot. And so for him to get that rush of fear, realizing that there is a way for him to finally have that power that he was not able to have because of how physically weak he is, that's a really easy way to take, you know, the origins here and flesh them out farther in the parts that are the most interesting. And, you know, honestly, the only reason I happen to like this origin is because I've always kind of had a thing for characters who they never stood a chance. Like, there was no way they were not going to turn out horrible just based on the circumstances of their birth.
You and me both, man. You and me both. I love that shit.
And they do that with ScareCrow, and because ScareCrow as a person, as just a character with his, you know, with his own personality, is so interested. He's one of the more well-read characters in Batman lore. The idea that his origin would be like something out of a Jane Austen novel or something out of literature is kind of fun to me, and I like that. And I just like how fucked up it is with like his super religious great-grandmother and stuff like that. I'm not necessarily disagreeing with either of you. I just kind of enjoy it for what it is. But I definitely get where you're coming from. And I think that the side of ScareCrow where he's a professor who goes too far, I think that does need to be explored a little bit more.
And I always feel bad whenever I like to talk about these things, I like to really dissect it, because this is a review show. And we are supposed to be like, hopefully, if anyone's listening is a writer and wants to be a writer, or just us talking about it, I think helps me personally, of just being able to craft and talk about what makes writers things and mistakes you should avoid, and keeping focus and being able to like analytically dissect that. But like, I also don't want to give the impression of any people listening who worked on this comics like, oh, this dude's just fucking British cunt, just shitting on us, all of us, man. Why is these dude fuck that guy? And I don't want to get that across, because I am just like, I did enjoy reading these comics. It is just for the sake of making sure to not to give up on the idea of, oh well, it's been done, we can't, ScareCrow's origin, let's just move on, because I think there's still like a really untapped idea here beyond even what we've all pitched, and maybe someone will write that story without even any our involvement, or maybe we'll write that story, or I don't know. So I do want to, I'm with you, Matt. It's just I like to play devil's advocate a little bit more, just to try and get into the meat of what maybe could be improved, or what maybe is already working here.
Okay. Well, I think I'm all out of stuff to talk about with this book, unless you guys had some more stuff you wanted to get into. I guess we didn't talk much about like the evil grandmother or the like mother situation. I don't know. I guess I just didn't find that stuff as interesting. I just kind of took it and kept moving on with the story.
I'm with you there.
This is a story that I like better recounting it to people as an example of how fucked up this character's backstory is than I do actually.
It's like those fucked up, like, it's that conversation you have with like a friend, right, who doesn't read comics. I'm just like, no man, comics are so fucked up. You knew ScareCrow, right? It's like, he's fucking, grandma was gonna kill him when he was fucking fresh out the womb. He's just 2 minutes out the pussy and we're gonna fucking kill this kid. That's how fucking badass comics are, bro. You don't even know. It's like, we've all been there.
Yeah. Well, no, these, this grandmother's just, his backstory is filled with a lot of these one-note characters, right? Like, you have this great-grandmother who has nothing more to her other than she's this insane, like, religious zealot. And, like, it's so funny because there's a moment in here where he finds his mother, who looks really young, by the way. He finds his mother, and his mother now has a child that she did keep and is raising, and he barely even has an emotional response to that.
I mean, he tries to shoot it.
Well, he does try to shoot it just out of,
I think
oh,
that's
there's a kid here, I'm going to shoot it.
response.
Well, okay, that's fair. But he was going to kill everyone in the room anyways.
Put the baby first, Matt.
That's
I'm gonna have to call you up on
that's
that crime scene investigation. I'm like, alright, there's been a murder. Oh, they shot the baby first, but
Yeah,
I
why
don't
was-
have an emotional response to it.
Yeah, why was the baby shot 7 times? I don't know. That's weird. But no, his backstory is just kind of filled with these like one-note stereotypes of characters that are just there to be a specific stereotype. He's got the druggy mother. He's got the super religious great-grandmother. There's something just about how fucked up the idea of a great-grandmother who purposefully makes it so her grandchild is attacked by crows as a punishment that I find just almost entertainingly over the top and silly.
Because he
in a
got
way
called
that
for
I think-
jacking off. Is why did crows attack him? It's just so stupid. You guys tell me she's making a sex thing, but she literally does his tragic origin backstories because he was jacking off under the sheets. You can't make this shit up.
Can't. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you at all, but I do enjoy it for the sheer, just unrelenting how much they clearly just wanted to communicate that this guy had like the worst possible childhood in the world, and there's something that I just kind of enjoy about that. I agree that it's not the most interesting part of Crane's journey as a character, but it was something that I at least kind of, I don't know. I don't have a lot of struggle.
No, like I get you. It's just one of those things where the trope of like the tragic childhood is a little like played out for me. Like, what was the recent Black Mask Year of the Villain tie-in comic? Where like we get a flashback to Roman's childhood, and his dad like beats him, like just decks him right in the fucking face as a child. And then you're like, oh man. And then his mom comes over and she's like, what are you doing? Get away from him, you idiot. And we're like, okay, well at least his mom's there to defend him. And then she starts like putting makeup on him and they're still gonna go out. She's like, I gotta do all this work now because of you. And I'm just like, Jesus, this is the worst childhood.
No,
like
it's very overplayed.
Yeah, just the tragic childhood. I want the character that had like the perfect upbringing but still turned out just horrifically evil, you know? Like who's got that going for him?
I mean, Hush kind of does.
Yeah, I guess that's disappointing then.
That's just Hush, yeah. He's disappointing.
yeah, drat. Oh well. Okay, guess we'll go ahead and move on. I'm sorry, I did have one other question. So Matt, you mentioned the New 52 did a new origin for ScareCrow?
New 52, his father, he's kind of raised more by his father, and his father is super interested in fear and does all this research. And he's got this, it's been a while since I've read it, but he's got this like basement, sort of like the basement from Cabin in the Woods. It's just filled with a bunch of scary shit. And Jonathan Crane gets locked down there, and then his father, see, I'm gonna feel so stupid because I haven't read this in years, but his father like dies, and so then Jonathan Crane is trapped down there in that basement for like several days before like he's found, and it just like fucking fucked him up for life. And then the rest of his origin's pretty much the same.
Oh, okay.
That's it. All they do is change his childhood and make it so like his father was like a proto like what Jonathan Crane would become. And then Jonathan Crane just kind of got messed up because of that. And I'm just like, if you're going to do childhood Jonathan Crane, if you're going to do Jonathan Crane had a really messed up thing happen to him in his childhood, just fucking go big or go home.
Fair enough. I don't know, I might have to go check that out, see if that fits in with the timeline a little bit better. Still...
And that's what they do in Gotham a little bit, because I know in the Gotham show they do like Jonathan Crane's father.
Still need to find the goddamn Mad Hatter origin. I'm like, we're getting closer to doing Long Halloween, and I really want to see if we can find a good Penguin and Mad Hatter origin. I've been told about a short Penguin one. Now I just need fucking Mad Hatter, and then we can pull off the hat trick. See what I did there? Because, Alrighty. Well, I guess we'll go ahead and move on to ratings then. I'll go first. For the year one annual, I'm gonna give it 2.5 out of 5 skull-shaped gas dispensers. And then for the two-parter, I'm gonna give it 3 out of 5 air conditioners. I had to go first so I could steal that one.
Diabolical. It turns out the real ScareCrow was among us all along.
For the annual... Oh, were you going, Alfie?
Oh. I just wanted to say well before you off.
I swear. For the annual, I'll give it 3 out of 5 ScareCrow tape recorders to mimic his voice. And then for the year 1, I think realistically, I think I'm also just going to do a 3 out of 5, but I'm going to give it 3 out of 5 workout tank tops that are branded with the Batman logo.
Where does he get it done at? Like, does he have his own embroidery machine?
Yeah, it's called Alfred.
Oh, okay. I need to get me one of those.
It's so cool. I love it.
Yeah. Alright, well, my end of things, been a little bit harsher on these things, but again, I don't really hate them. They're kind of disposable to me. It's kind of just still waiting on that, like, definitive thing. So I'm gonna give these like straight down the middle, like an average. 2.5 for the annual Crane through sacred text signed by Ra's al Ghul, for these moves was too dangerous even him to attempt. And next, I'm gonna throw in for the 2-part. I'm gonna give it 3 just because the Robin points to give it a little boost. 3 out of 5. Stained earbud crane bed sheets.
Nice. All right, well, next week we'll be talking about Batman Snow and Batman Prey. That's Doctor Strange and Mr. Freeze origin stories. So, it should be a good time. Everyone, thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next time. Until then, I'm the Philosopher.
I'm the champion of the oppressed.
I'm the Sonic Erotica lover.
And we are your Geeky Gentlemen. And we will be discussing things.